So I see we got a new strain of virus, which is kind of odd because I was noticing that it's named Delta. Well, Delta is a brainwave state. You got alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and let's see. It's when you fall into sleep and you're in a deep sleep. But it's fucking crazy. You know, it's probably been out for a minute. I mean, I ain't really paying attention to what's going on because I've been so slammed at work. That's another thing, man. You can't get nobody that wants to work. About as fast as we can hire people, they're either quitting or someone else is quitting. Nobody wants to work. And we're talking about jobs where they're making $1,000 a week, plus they're getting a $6,000 sign-on bonus. And then it's summertime, so people want to go on vacation. But so we got this Delta. So if you look up the brainwave states, you'll see that, you know, Delta is when you fall into a deep sleep, and that's kind of fucking odd if you ask me. You know, you're going to name viruses, and it's not just one. If you go look, you'll see that they named all the viruses after these brainwave states. Which, you know, a lot of people, you know, I guess maybe they don't know. But even your colleges, you know, the sororities are named after brainwave states. So that by itself is, you know, a little suspect. But I'll see if I can link a story on it behind this video. Y'all have a good day. Hopefully soon, you know, I'll go on with Low-Key T Uncensored or Low-Key T Live, and Smokehouse Studios. If you're listening to this, maybe you can check it out. Maybe it's something that you'd want to put on your show. But I got to give a shout out to, you know, Smokehouse Studios, because he's on iHeartRadio. He does a great job. So if you're religious and you want to hear what's going on or get that side of it, you know, Smokehouse Studios does some awesome work. You know, I won't go on his show. He probably wouldn't want to have me on his show because I cuss too much. You know, us outlaw people, we cuss a lot. Y'all have a good day.
According to the CDC, almost 150 million Americans have been fully vaccinated. That's about 45% of the population. The Delta variant first emerged in India, and then it made its way to England to become the dominant strain there. Is the Delta variant more pathogenic, meaning is it more likely to cause worse disease? Yes. In a study done in Scotland, which was published in The Lancet, researchers showed that the risk of being hospitalized with the Delta variant is double that of the Alpha variant. Recently, the Delta variant has made its way to the US, where it already constitutes 10% of COVID cases. However, that figure is doubling every 2 weeks, and it's only a matter of time before it becomes a dominant strain. Right now, in the Midwest, it makes up about 25% of cases in Colorado, Montana, North and South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. Now, in a study done in the UK from May 20th to June 7th, the researchers led by Stephen Riley, they looked at their data, which suggested that the Delta variant is about 60% more transmissible than the Alpha, which was the variant that was first identified in the UK, which is more contagious than the original strain that was originally emerging from Wuhan. The research team showed that with the Delta variant, there was a doubling time of 11 days and an estimated R, or reproductive number, of 1.44.
Whether you're in a deep sleep, taking a test, or watching a YouTube video, your brain is abuzz with activity. There are millions of electrical pulses passing between neurons that are sending messages to each other. When those signals spread, clusters of neurons start getting feedback from others, and networks of cells synchronize their firing. It becomes a repeating cycle or rhythm, a brainwave, or as neuroscientists call them, neural oscillations. That organized electrical activity is strong enough to be detected by electrodes on the scalp, with a technique called electroencephalography, or EEG. And that's allowed us to study brainwaves to try to make sense of the brain. While things are still pretty mysterious, lately we've been making strides to link brainwaves to things like consciousness, memory, and maybe even certain diseases. Now, brainwaves aren't one size fits all. There are actually lots of different electrical patterns defined by their frequency. They're measured in cycles, or the number of times the neurons are firing per second. Brainwaves also vary in amplitude, with lower amplitudes as they speed up. There are 5 main types, and there's no hard and fast rules about their functions. But generally, the higher frequency the wave, the more alert and awake you are. So the slowest of these 5 waves, which are of relatively high amplitude, are delta waves. They're typically linked with deep sleep. Slightly faster are theta waves, which are often associated with daydreaming or meditation. The next step up are alpha waves. These are common when you're awake, but relaxed, like when you still have your eyes closed. Beta waves are even higher frequency and lower amplitude, and seem to happen when you're awake and thinking about something. The smallest, fastest oscillations are gamma waves. They tend to be around when you're deeply focused on something. Now, even though we talk about beta waves when you're in class, or delta waves when you're sleeping, for simplicity's sake, the reality is that your brain is abuzz with all different frequencies of
Art
waves.
and science of manipulation come to be better understood, the dictators of the future will doubtless learn to combine techniques of propaganda with the non-stop distractions which, in the West, are now threatening to drown in a sea of irrelevance the rational information essential to the maintenance of individual liberty. But it is not just an endless supply of distractions which make possible a brave new world. Huxley also predicted that in the future, certain forms of technology would be used to increase the suggestibility and obedience of a population, so that everyone can be depended upon to behave almost as predictably as machines. In Brave New World, the technology used for this purpose was called hypnopaedia, or sleep teaching, which Huxley called the greatest moralizing and socializing force of all time. Every night, while asleep, citizens were exposed to propaganda and repeated suggestions from the state. Huxley based his idea of sleep teaching on the science of hypnosis. Scientists have long known that when an individual is placed under hypnosis, alpha waves are activated in the brain, just as they are when in a light sleep. In both cases, suggestibility is dramatically heightened, as Huxley explained. Most of the things that can be done with and to a person in hypnotic trance can be done with and to a person in light sleep. Verbal suggestions can be passed through the cortex to the midbrain, the brainstem, and the autonomic nervous system. If these suggestions are well conceived and frequently repeated, new patterns of feeling can be installed and old ones modified. Post-hypnotic commands can be given, slogans, formulas, and trigger words deeply ingrained in the memory. While not subjects of sleep teaching, many people in the modern world watch television on a near-daily basis for hours on end. Scientists have known for decades that television watching activates alpha waves in the brain, thus placing the individual in a hypnotic-like trance, primed for suggestions and ready to be programmed. The neurosurgeon Adam Lipson explains, "There have been EEG studies that demonstrate that television watching converts the brain from beta wave activity to alpha waves, which are associated with a daydreaming state and a reduced use of critical thinking skills. When in a television-induced hypnotic state, cliches and slogans from the mainstream media, moral values and ideological principles from shows and movies, and suggestions from commercials, politicians, celebrities, and state-sponsored propaganda bypass the critical faculties and seep into the foundations of the mind. Over time, the typical television watcher is transformed into an opinionated robot. His or her evaluations of the world are mindless regurgitations of whatever has been absorbed from the TV. Nearly 70 years ago, the medical doctor Joost Meerloo warned of the hypnotizing dangers of television, dangers which now apply to computers, smartphones, and any other technology which turns the human being into a mesmerized spectator of a screen. No longer does man think in personal values, following his own conscience and ethical evaluations. He thinks more and more in the values brought to him by mass media. Television keeps him in continual awe and passive fixation. Consciously, he may protest against these anonymous voices, but nevertheless, their suggestions ooze into his system. In Brave New World, suggestibility was heightened not just through the use of technology, but also with a super-drug called Soma.
The more contagious Delta variant is now the dominant strain here in the U.S. That's according to the latest Centers for Disease Control and Prevention data. The report comes just one day after President Biden again urged Americans who haven't to get vaccinated as the variant takes hold in areas with low uptake. Nancy Chen is following a worsening outbreak in Missouri.
Tonight, federal officials are deploying a COVID surge team to help Missouri medical workers deal with a growing COVID crisis. In the past month, hospitalizations are up more than 50%, and cases have tripled at Mercy Hospital in Springfield.
The disease process is faster than before, and they are getting sicker sooner than before.
Dr. Mayra Juarez is a pulmonary critical care physician at Mercy, where the ventilator supply at one point last week was critically low.
It feels like a lot of people have let their guards down.
It's very saddening to talk to a patient, and all of them invariably said, I wish I would have taken the vaccine.
Researchers say the highly infectious Delta variant accounts for at least 75% of infections in 4 states. In Missouri, it's nearly all cases. Only 40% of residents are fully vaccinated.
This variant is just brutal. It takes no prisoners.
Deborah Carmichael lost her daughter Trisha Jones to the Delta variant a month ago. She said her daughter was unvaccinated.
It's just so excruciating. And they become so helpless and just destroyed by this virus.
Doctors are urging vaccinations to prevent deaths and large outbreaks, like the one at a Texas church camp, where more than 100 kids and adults tested positive. And although masks are still required on airplanes, many aren't complying. Earlier this week, an American Airlines flight from Charlotte to the Bahamas was delayed by a day when a group of teenagers reportedly refused to mask up.
Was being rowdy and not listening and not wearing their masks.
But in a bright spot today, frontline workers were celebrated at a ticker tape parade in New York City. The hometown heroes honored for their sacrifice and dedication.
In Missouri, officials have reinstated a mask mandate at some summer schools, while the Mercy Health System just announced today that all employees must be vaccinated by the end of September, or they could be fired.
That's when the students from, say, United States, if they're trained in Lumumba University or developing nations,
back
the students I was dealing with, are being sent back from the Soviet
college-age
Union here.
students would go to different
if they were
countries as
already
exchange
in the United
students,
States, in the country,
and they were
which
put
is
under mind
the object
control
of subversion.
to bring
They
back
spring to action.
communists
the sleepers
and
go up.
socialists, which
They
socialism
slept for 15
will
to
always
20
turn
years.
into communism.
Now
and they will
become
come here
leaders
and they
of
will
groups,
destroy America
preachers,
through their socialist communist.
I don't know, public figures prominently. They actively include themselves in a political process. All of a sudden we see a homosexual. 15 years ago he did his dirty job and nobody cared. Now he makes it a political issue. He demands recognition, respect, human rights, and he rallies a large group of people. And there are violent clashes between him and police, his group and ordinary people, no matter what. It's black against white, yellows against green, doesn't matter where the division line goes. As long as this group come into antagonistic clash, sometimes militantly, sometimes with firearms, that is destabilization process. The sleepers, many of whom are simply KGB agents, become leaders of the process of destabilization. Doesn't mean that Comrade Andropov sends Comrade Ivanov to the United States. The person who takes care is already here. He is a respected citizen of the United States. Sometimes he gets money from various foundations for his legitimate struggle for, I don't know, human rights, women's rights, kid lib, prison lib, whatever. There are sympathetic Americans who donate their money to him. This stabilization process usually leads directly to the process of crisis. In case of developing nations, that's the area where I was active. The process starts when the legitimate bodies of power, the social structure collapse. It cannot function anymore. So instead, we have artificial body injected into society, such as non-elected committees. You remember I was talking about them here. Social workers who are not elected by people, media who are self-appointed rulers of your opinion, some strange groups which claim that they know how to lead society forward. They don't usually. All they care is how to collect donations and sell their own concocted ideology, mixture of religion and ideology. Here, we have all this artificial body claiming power. If the power is denied to them, they take it by force. In case of Iran, for example, all of a sudden we have revolutionary committees. What kind of revolution? There was no revolution yet, and yet they had the committees. They were taking power of judgment. They had the power of execution, they had the power of legislation, and that they had the power of judicial. All of them combined in one person, who is half-baked intellectual, sometimes graduated from Harvard University or Berkeley. He comes back to his country and he thinks that he knows the answer to all the social, economical problems. Okay? Crisis is when society cannot function any more productively. It collapses, obviously. That's the word for crisis. So therefore, the population at large is looking for a savior. The religious groups are expecting a messiah to come. The workers say, we have family to feed. Let's have a strong government, maybe socialist government, centralized. When somebody put the employers on their place and let us work. We are sick and tired of going to strike and missing overtime and all that stuff. We need some strong man, strong government, a leader, a savior is needed. Population is sick and tired already. And here we are. We have a savior. Either a foreign nation comes in, or the local group of leftists, Marxists, no matter what they call themselves, Sandinista, a reverend or some sort, Bishop Muzureva, like in Zimbabwe, doesn't matter. A savior comes and says, I will lead you. So we have two alternatives here. Civil war and invasion. Okay? See how it goes? Civil war, we know what it is. Lebanon is the best example. The civil war, which was artificially implanted in Lebanon by injection of force of PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization. Invasion we have in many other countries like Afghanistan, name any East European country, it was invaded by the Soviet army. But the result is the same. The next stage is normalization. Normalization is a very ironic word, of course. It is borrowed from 1968 situation in Czechoslovakia, when the Soviet propaganda and after them New York Times declared the country is normalized. The tanks moved into Prague, so there is no more Prague Spring, there is no more violence. Normalization.